Okay, I think we've officially passed the 5-minute mark, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, for any of you who are just joining, go ahead and fill out our poll. You can keep up menti.com at the code 8017272. We've got a couple of polls throughout the session today that we'll be using, so feel free to keep that up. Submit your answers to this first question, and we've got in the chat also some details about how to get credit for participating in this session. So with that, let's go to the next slide and get started. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about community currency, place-based monetary tools for building sustainable local economies. So as we're going through the presentation, think about what you would call your type of currency. A couple of us are from the Bronx. We're here representing New York. So our money system is called shmoney. Next slide. So good afternoon for those of you who are joining us on the session today. My name is Lydia Gaby. Just to spend a little bit of time talking about our group that's joining us here today. On the picture, reading from left to right, we're joined by Gloria, Manuela, Rhonda, Digzer, Durain, and myself. This group came together last year for the 2019 Urban Design Forum Forefront Fellowship here in New York City. It's a fellowship that we took together in order to support policy design for mayor's offices in New York City. Specifically, that was about focusing on urban heat. So as a female team representing people of color and immigrant backgrounds, we have personally witnessed uneven investment by the government and others in the resilience and recovery of our communities. So even prior to all of the chaos and revolution taking place this year, we have been exploring planning and policy tools that communities can use themselves to do what? To withstand unexpected shocks like Superstorm Sandy, like we saw here in New York City, or the COVID-19 pandemic, to support each other against the daily stress that we all face every day, and to create some long-lasting local self-sufficiency and enable self-determination. Next slide. Have we done together? We've done a lot of different research on community resiliency, and through our project, we assembled these 4 resilience strategies: collective purchasing, community currency, resilience hubs, and resident power. These are 4 examples of strategies that are already in place today that people are using across the country and in the world. We're fascinated by their potential to support communities and communities of color, particularly in New York City and in New York City's public housing. So we've got a lot of information about all 4 of these strategies, but today we're going to be focusing on community currency. So what is community currency? A community currency is an alternate economic system that is used by groups with a common goal or a bond, like members of a neighborhood, a locality, an association. The goal is to keep your spending power circulating within the local community to meet community needs. Generally, it builds and reinforces relationships within the community by trading local assets, things that people can offer, like their time, their expertise, their labor, services that they can provide to their community, local goods, in exchange for resources that can address their critical needs. So, this can act as an alternative, or it can help to complement the conventional currency and economic system that we have in place today. Next slide. So at the beginning of this session, we asked, how much do you know about community currency? We can see here that most of us don't actually know very much. So we're hoping that we can talk a little bit about the details today, provide some information. As we said at the top of the session, feel free to use the chat and ask questions along the way, and we'll make sure to try and answer those throughout the presentation. Next slide. So from the pandemic, you might have heard about mutual aid. Mutual aid and mutual aid groups are not a new concept, but these types of efforts have seen a lot of renewed energy and interest during the pandemic for reasons I'm sure we are all well aware. One mutual aid leader called a mutual aid group a political process through which communities that have been ignored, have been deliberately deprived of resources, can empower themselves with the resources that they have to take care of one another. So mutual aid involves neighbors volunteering their time or their resources to help one another when the government, large institutions, when their interference is limited or non-existent, basically when they can't fulfill their basic needs through the current economic flow. So community currency can be connected to this concept of mutual aid. It can help to expand the impact and the helpfulness of the mutual aid groups. It can address the financial element of compensation for mutual aid, which is a constant problem. You can think of community currency as a sort of a different and more formal or organizational long-term structure that mutual aid is sort of a part of and is doing some parts of today. I'll turn it over to Gloria for our next slide.
So what we really want to do is develop on that idea of community currency being a political process. And we're going to highlight a couple of examples in the next slide. So first, we're going to look into Ithaca Hour, which is a community currency created in and for Ithaca, New York. It circulated between 1991 to 2000. Doreen can play the video.
This clip and then decide whether Ithaca hours are money or a form of barter or something else.
Okay, so this might be going a bit slow.
Another in our occasional series In Search of America. This is a news division project, a primetime television series next week, a book as well, and abcnews.com, which has us reporting on the values and traditions of the nation through the lives of individual Americans. Tonight, we talk about money and values in Ithaca, New York. When Jim Houghton, a graphic designer in Ithaca, goes shopping at the farmer's market, he participates in an American experience.
Do you accept hours?
He makes his purchases with a local currency called Ithaca Hours. Other people here do the same.
I buy a lot of my veggies and all my bread and everything, all with Ithaca Hours.
Sometimes I spend them in restaurants or movie theaters.
More than 500 businesses in Ithaca accept the local currency, called an hour, to remind people the real source of money is people's time and skill and energy.
Take some hours.
A single hour has a $10 value.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You get them at the bank or buy them in a store.
There's almost 9,000 hours in circulation now, which is $90,000 worth of local currency.
U.S. currency can be spent anywhere, of course. Ithaca Hours only in Ithaca.
They stay right here. They travel round and round and round and build our economy through that multiplying effect of money changing hands back and forth, enriching everybody.
Joseph Wetmore runs the Ithaca Hours Bank from the cash drawer in his used bookstore. The bills don't say "In God we trust," but "In Ithaca we trust."
In Ithaca we trust. It's not based on some state thing or some national thing or some religious thing. It's based on Ithacans getting together and saying, this paper's of value. Without Ithacans, this paper would be worthless.
There is local currency in many American communities meant to encourage a sense of community and a reliance on one another. When the country was being founded, there was no national currency.
At the time, the founding fathers, you saw individual currencies within states. You saw different banks issuing their own individual currencies.
Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson thought a national currency was absolutely necessary. The first national paper currency was issued in the 1860s. But local currency has never gone away. During the Great Depression, people who had no money used it to formalize barter.
You're going to have a good time there.
In Ithaca today, the hour system has helped small businesses to grow.
I want to support the other businesses in Ithaca, and I want other businesses to support me.
The stronger individual communities are, the little microeconomies, the stronger the national economy or the global economy is.
Local currency, then and now, giving a sense of community.
So as you heard from the video, one Ithaca hour was equivalent to US $10, which is reflective of the average per hour wages and salary in the country at that time. The currency came in several denominations and were used to buy plumbing, carpentry, electrical work, childcare, chiropractic, and thousands of other local goods and services. And so why was it created? The board of Ithaca Hour said this: "We printed our own money because we watched federal dollars come to town, shake a few hands, then leave to buy rainforest lumber and fight wars. Ithaca Hours, by contrast, stay in our region to help us hire each other. While US dollars make us increasingly dependent on transnational corporations and bankers, Ithaca Hours reinforce community trading and expand commerce, which is more accountable to our concerns for ecology and social justice. Ithaca Hour was able to reduce dependence on imports and transport fuels, expanded the local money supply, promoted and expanded new and loyal customers, and enabled shoppers to afford premium prices for locally crafted and grown goods. And it also created new business and jobs. And one of the significant outcomes include double local minimum wages to $10, a directory called Ithaca Money, which was issued monthly and listed participant names, offers, and requests. And over 1,000 participants, inclusive of businesses and individuals, partook in the economy. And at its peak, over 100,000 worth of Ithaca hours have flowed. And members who accepted hours could spend them as they choose. Ithaca hours allow participants more flexibility than the typical barter system and streamline record keeping. And there was no requirement that transactions be logged into a central computer or that exchanges be made on the basis of a predetermined price. So you can see from the slide, one of the fun facts is that Ithaca hours was actually the first proper money in the US to honor an African American. And amid the economic fallout from COVID-19, next slide, please, Doreen. Small town leaders have struck on the same idea as Ithaca. In Tanino, Washington, the mayor decided to set aside a support package for low-income residents hurt by the pandemic. Instead of using federal dollars, he printed the money on thin sheets of wood designed exclusively for use in Tanino. In the town of Castellino del Bifeno in Italy, and pardon my pronunciation, they started printing a local paper currency nicknamed the Ducati in late April to stimulate commerce. In Mexico, Santa Maria Jalapa sent about 2,000 worth of local currency called jalapesos to help poor residents buy vegetables, chickens, and tortillas locally. And also in the Brazilian city of Marica is making extra money off of a digital local currency known as the Mumbuca. Mumbuca is so omnipresent, even city official is receiving their salaries in them. The money is fueled into no interest loan that are offered out to members of the community. And we find out that it's also happening in New York City. From our research, we learned about community currency when interviewing Gita Mader from the Asia Initiative. Asia Initiative develops social capital credit, also short for SOCs, community currency in the global south and most recently in the United States. SOCs helps people take charge of developing their own neighborhood and improving their lives. Credits are earned for performing acts of social good, such as water and waste management, planting trees, tutoring or mentoring youth. The credits can be redeemed for critical resources like school fees, healthcare vouchers, or skill employment training. Since 2014, SOCs have been implementing successfully in over 15 sites across India, Ghana, Kenya, and now in the United States. In New York City, the Asia Initiative started to work at the Niger Polo Grand Towers in 2019, and together with students from Columbia University. They engage with residents to identify the community issues and priorities. But due to the pandemic, the work has currently on hold, given the disparity in the access to essential goods and services during this time. So we see that a year that follows as an opportunity to build upon this work and scale it to serve resiliency strategy in all of the Niger campuses. And the spontaneous mobilization of scores of mutual aid groups that Lydia had mentioned across the city can definitely help this effort. And now we're going to turn to Doreen to start our workshop.
So hi, everyone, I'm Doreen. So today we wanted to imagine how we as advocates, as planners, and as policy folks could take inspiration from mutual aid groups and the other community currencies to create an adaptable social support network as a model for preserving kindness and compassion, and more importantly, justice in the economy. So let's create a community currency together that's going to be circulated theoretically among us within this workshop community. So to do that, our exercise we're going to be going through, the first thing we're going to be identifying what our collective needs and wants are. What does our economy need to provide? And hopefully by the end of this session, we'll be able to answer, would a community currency work for us? So the goals for community currency can be wide and can be extremely varied. But for today's exercise, let's say that the goal is to help support individuals and businesses within the community through increased local spending. So we wanted to talk about how we can use our skills as community planners and designers to build community resilience. So the goal really reflects some of the main challenges that we're facing right now within the pandemic and its economic effects. Our current system, we hope, will ultimately connect residents and local stakeholders and help us all meet basic needs that aren't currently met. 2, keep funds circulating within this local economy. And 3, build stronger relationships along the way. So to begin, we must, of course, identify what our community needs are and, distinguish them from the things that we want. So obviously, when we think about essential services, we're talking about the things that are necessary to meet our basic needs, such as childcare, elder care, doing laundry, the preparation of meals, safe transit to do grocery shopping or picking up medicine, versus the things that we're viewing more indulgent. So these are things that are driven by desire for fun or entertainment or satisfaction. But especially during the pandemic, we've realized that these are the things that help improve our well-being and sustain our mental health. And for people like me, it's like getting my hair done, potentially getting my nails done. I know lots of us are learning new instruments, learning new skills, trying to get fit. So we're going to be doing 2 polls back to back, so you guys can start logging on to Menti with the same code 8017272. And the first question is, list 3 essential needs that you have had during COVID. So as you said, essential things, the ones that you need to survive on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So I'm going to give you guys about, a minute or so. So I'm just going to show the second question, or the second poll, which are list your top 3 wants that you've experienced during COVID. So as we said, needs and wants can change from person to person. What I view as essential may be considered non-essential for someone else. But I think that, or we as a group think that understanding what these things are and kind of the breadth of what these things are is essential in being able to create this new economy and create this new currency, which we call money.
Having a bit of a technical difficulty in the background, so we will open the poll shortly.
Mm-hmm.
So Doreen, if you just want to continue on, we will be sure to address the polls in a little while. I'll tell you when we can come back to that.
Sure. Okay. All right. Because we, are planners and we expected that there probably would be some technical difficulty, we pre-populated a slide for you guys. So we'd asked a couple of friends when we were practicing this. And this is some of the things that they came up with in terms of their needs: someone to come in and check on their mom, a caretaker for a child or an elder, someone to help get access to school supplies, a tutor, painting and renovating apartments, a new cultural experience, a community garden. I know, at least for me, putting my hands in soil, I don't know, I feel much better after doing it. I know that Rhonda and Digzer are like low-key urban gardeners in their in their apartments. Things like hygiene workshops in my community, improved waste management. Of course, all of these things are very varied, but when it comes to the needs side, they seem, relatively similar. So until the poll's ready, I'm just going to talk on these.
The poll is working for me, so people can go ahead in the survey. If we go back to make sure that people have the code, then they can go in and take the poll. And while we're doing that,
please said it is working now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. First one is, what are your needs? Second one, what are your wants that you've experienced during the pandemic in particular? So I'm going to put 60 seconds on the count.
I'm seeing some of the responses come in. They're really great. Reliable internet, prescription medicine, food, groceries. These are amazing.
Mm-hmm. remember, when we're thinking about these things, we're talking about things that eventually we're hoping that this new economy that we're creating together, this new currency, is going to be able to encompass. So think about that when you're, filling in these polls. So about 10 more seconds.
If you haven't pushed go to the next poll yet, you can go to the next question and list your 3 top ones.
Mm-hmm. And our handy dandy the tech folks, Rhonda and Digger, thumbs up when I can go to the next slide to show the results.
While we're waiting, also, we had one question about why some of the currency systems haven't lasted for a long time or have gone out of service, like Ithaca hours. In our research, we found that these types of currency systems, they come about from the community. They're really community and people power. And so some of them, they don't last for a very long time because the person or the people behind it have moved on. Sometimes they don't last for a long time because they run into technical or design issues. And we'll talk about some of those later on today. But sometimes it ends up being that people aren't circulating the economy or the currency enough through the economy.
Yeah.
I'll
just add to that while we wait. In Ithaca hours, one of the issues that they faced was that people are trying to save and hoard the currency. And that's a big no-no when it comes to community currency. The aim with them is to spend it. You can't save it, you can't invest it. So if you have people who are taking it in and not circulating it through the economy, you're going to have like a liquidity problem. So that's, I think, one of the more common reasons why they have failed in the past.
Mm-hmm. And just on the universal income point, so universal income is an idea where everyone gets a set amount of funding. A currency system like community currency is based on what people are providing and exchanging. So it's not that everyone gets a certain amount of money and can just sort of spend it. It's more like you can put together a system of exchange between people who have resources and people who have needs. So we'll talk a little bit about how exactly that works as we go through the exercise.
Yeah, and keep posting questions in the comment section. Thumbs up. All right. Magic. But now I can't see, but I can zoom. All right. So in the needs section, food. I'm seeing medicine. I'm seeing groceries. I'm seeing childcare, diapers, testing, housing, a notary, elder care, time, open space, plant medicine, very interesting, reliable internet, mental health, medicine pickup, seeing loved ones, income. Makes sense to me. And then in the wants, I just want to compare the difference between the wants and the needs. I think this is obviously saying that we are a lot more similar when it comes to the things that we need. And when it comes to things that keep us sane, I'm seeing haircut, travel, gym, exercise, lots of plants, lots of restaurants. Let me see if I can. Rhonda and Digger, can you read a couple of them? I'm having difficulty seeing them.
Hugs.
Aw.
Music, culture, local produce, community, jam, like a spread, I'm assuming. Human contact, hairdresser, public library, speaking to strangers, being with loved ones, restaurants,
outdoor access,
anything. Yeah,
sports,
exactly.
Okay. Now, I think understanding the breadth of these goods and services, and of course, lots of these are intangible, which are extremely important, but an economy usually wouldn't be providing some of these things. But for the other things that are left in these word bubbles, an economy could potentially provide those. Now let's jump to the next poll. And this is the last poll, we promise. Understanding the breadth of these goods and services, let's think about what you can offer. as a member of this, online workshop community, imagine that we're all living together, we're living near to each other. What of these, more specifically, what services are you willing to trade with a neighbor to be able to get one of the needs or wants that you listed? If we look back at I'll just flip back. If you look back at the list of goods and services, some of these we are probably able to get through an app or online. But if we think about this online workshop, as I said, as a community, some of us have the skills and the capabilities to provide these to one another. So, for example, I'm not necessarily great in math, but I've experienced teaching elementary school kids. So I could probably be a tutor for someone's child in math or sciences. Similarly, Diggs and Rhonda, as I said before, their pandemic hobbies have been, planters or growers, so they've been replanting these baby plants, and I'm pretty sure that they're willing to contribute to this economy by giving you, nice, lush, beautiful succulents and pathos and fiddly figs or whatever else. So hop on back to Minty and think about what could you provide in this economy. When you're thinking about that, it can be time, the time you're able to give to someone in service of someone. It can be resources. So, Digger works at NYCHA, so she has an understanding of the housing system. So maybe she can help direct someone to the resources to find affordable housing. Could it be special skills? Manuela's husband plays classical music. Could he also teach me violin potentially? So I'm going to give you guys about 30 to 45 seconds to answer this, and then we'll go to the results.
One thing I can just call out, if it's helpful, you can also offer, your mental or other intangible capacities. So I saw that some people sort of talked about how they needed hugs. Hugs is something that we can all offer each other or think about offering. So you can think about those types of things as well.
To see how diverse it could be, the responses, if it's going to be as busy as the kind of ones.
The last one?
Yeah.
Me too, I'm interested. And we can also share the results. Like if anyone is interested in the presentation and the results of these word clouds, we can also, find a way to share that with you guys at the end of the presentation.
This is a good question that we might want to talk about. One of the good things about community currency is that you don't necessarily have to charge for it. So, we'll talk about exactly how it works in a little bit. But, we can think of it as paying it forward to the community for things that we want to make sure sort of have some kind of value.
Okay, so hopefully people are able to see this. Big one, tutoring, childcare, cooking, delivery. So someone has a car, can pick up stuff for you. Hugs, graphic design. If you're throwing a party or a wedding and you need someone to make some invitations, someone can do grocery shopping. We're seeing labor. We're seeing plants, running errands, groceries, dog walking, admin support. If you're trying to start, a business and you need someone to do, HR or accounting related stuff, we have someone who can help with that. Lots of plant babies. Architectural design, bicycle maintenance, that's very helpful. Physical labor, yoga, outreach, a bunch of different things. I think we're seeing some low-key chefs also in this session. So I think what we're seeing with this word cloud is that when people think about what they're able to offer, some people are thinking about their professional expertise and other people are thinking about it in relationship to their personal traits. So people who are willing to be a shoulder to cry on, that's a personal trait. People who have skills in HR or in admin or design, these are the professional traits that they're willing to share with people in their community. And other people think about it in relationship to the possessions that they have, things that they're willing to share. So our power tool, we had someone who's willing to fix and probably lend out bicycles or bicycle equipment. And then lots of other people are thinking about it in terms of the time they're willing to spend with someone in service. So we talked about childcare, elder care. So what people are willing to offer is a very personal decision, and we know that. But these responses give a sense of some of the different types of things that people can exchange using this community currency. And I think this was a helpful exercise to understand that not everything that some of the things that we buy on a regular basis and we don't really put thought to where it's coming from, some of that can be sourced locally, can be sourced from your neighbors. Manuela?
So now, in order to really determine whether or not a community currency system could be impactful in our community, let's talk a little bit about who especially we want to serve. So our team has been particularly focused on more than 400,000 residents that live in New York City's Housing Authority's development. This is the biggest public housing system in the country. NYCHA provides shelter to extremely low-income households, more than any other program in the city. When looking at this population, it is important to note that 40% of all households are being led by seniors. 31.5% are younger than 21 years old, and many of them are parents. Additionally, we want to concentrate on the current situation with COVID-19 and how it has been really heavily impacting local businesses and local service providers. Without making value judgments on what any one person can actually provide or not provide, we did create these 4 fictitious community personas just to help illustrate where gaps in goods and services might arise and run a scenario to see how a community currency could play out among these participants. So what could we call this community currency? We could turn back to what our cover slide was illustrating and say that we're calling it a shmoney. And we could also need to ask what shmoney will be based on. So what are the methods of exchange that are out there that we can pick from? So next slide. So now that we, for the purpose of this exercise, determined the scope of the community currency system, when meaning scope, it's really about who is the community, who we should focus on, and what are the needs and gaps that we could help fill up. The next step will be to define what would be the method of exchange. So there are several examples in the literature about community currency, and here we just list a couple of them. Just to explain them better, buy local scripts or paper currencies are those that you can only exchange in a local area. They're meant to mostly provide discounts to encourage buying from local businesses. There's also something called the fiat script. The main idea is that this type of paper currency is issued by a single organization and is not backed by gold or anything other than the trust of its members. But like the dollar, it must be carefully controlled by the organization or else there could be inflation. There are also mutual credit systems. Those do not require a managing organization. They're purely based on exchanges between community members. Time banks, as we talked about, are mutual credit systems focused on volunteering and services. So back to the Ithaca example, 1 hour, they determined to be $10. So this is kind of a mix of this system and the fiat script. When determining the value per hour, many communities, they aim to shoot for a livable minimum wage. And the main idea here is that everyone's time is valued the same. So these different systems each have their own benefits and drawbacks. However, the fiat script and mutual credit systems are the ones that increase purchasing power. That's why we listed them here. So let's say we choose to proceed with a mutual aid credit system. So in the next slide, more specifically for our time bank, let's establish that, and we're calling them cardies, worth half an hour. So here you can see in the story that an elder person joins shmoney and asks for help with picking up her medicine at the pharmacy. Let's say that the young person has time and is able to go pick up the medicine. That person earns 1 cardie. So let's say the young person is actually looking for a job and decides to spend his cardie having the business owner who has looked through so many resumes when trying to hire and review the resume and give me some tips. So let's say that that person then earned 2 credits or 2 cardies. So next, Let's say that the business owner may be just working the whole day and not have time to take care of their kids and spend time with their kids. So they may look for someone else, like a parent, to read to their son. The parent then earns cardies and spends them getting a knitted sweater from the elder. And the cool thing is that now the elder is able to receive cardies, and then actually, because it takes quite some time to do a sweater, she earns enough credits to then spend in the next 2 months for pickup medicine. So here you can see on the bottom of the page the quarterly statement of the elder. So while this illustration of how community currency could play out is not very complicated, it does help illustrate how community currency could be successful, as the system relies really on the details of its design and operations. So let's go through some of those items that we identified as being really helpful in making the system works. So first of all, next slide, I guess. So first of all, it's really crucial that tasks that grant cardies include items that assist fulfilling participants' basic needs. This is not just so we can tackle the current issue with these more basic gaps in our society, but also because it helps the community currency circulate. We already talked about it, but to explain that better, community currency should not pile in a corner, something that our money system encourages, and something that only the wealthy can do, increasing inequality. So techniques to achieve a healthy circulation is, for example, having our cardies expiring. This is similar to what we all experience with coffee shops, right? You can earn points, and I don't know about all of you, but I particularly love acquiring them. And during the pandemic, because I'm not going to the same coffee shops, I'm not traveling much, I'm just, in my house, as probably a lot of you are, I really would love if I could have exchanged those points to something else. I basically lost them all. It's very sad. So moving forward, it's also important to talk about the scale of the currency. This is really, really key and involves a lot of conversations and a lot of testing really to make it work. So it may be helpful to incubate a currency in a smaller community. Too wide of an area like the United States may be meaningless and not effectively build solidarity. This is also a matter of enforcement. So if you think about it, community currency first and foremost relies on peer trust. However, if the area is too small, people tend to not have enough of an incentive to participate and circulate the currency. A wider geographic area may provide a diversity of service and goods that make a currency useful and fulfill a greater range of needs, and as I saw from the results, a lot of wants. So to help with that, encouraging participation will be key in the success of the system. And one example encouraging that is if our cardies would to be given anytime someone refers a neighbor to join the Shmoney, and the neighbor then registers in the program. So it also should be really designed around those that are trusted and who are already natural leaders in the community. So to pause and speak a little bit about it, in the next slide, we do have an example. So from our case study research, we learned that there is a need for one full-time manager who is responsible for tracking the community currency. The Asian Initiatives utilizes this technique by first asking the community to identify who that may be. And this is a crucial first step. They then provide initial training to the manager and helps the community track and evaluates the community currency circulation. Plus, they would also help and the community conduct any modifications that could help in making it more efficient. So that assistance from the organization in this case is often done for the first 3 years. 3 years is a good time for people to implement, evaluate, change, and implement. So until after that, the organization can actually remove themselves and the community can take full ownership. Next slide. So to talk about how the menu and values work. And this is, again, another crucial step in the system. In this step, we really need to talk about how the menu of items and their value could work out. So diving in on this prototype and what the menu could look like for each of the 4 personas, Since this illustrates a time bank, the community is basically valuing time, so without regard of what the task is. So as you can see, items that take longer generally result in a greater number of CARDs. As an example, to get help with college calculus, the young person would need to use 2 CARDs, but maybe the resume check costs only 1. So he could do yard work to pay for the calculus assistance, or he may do 2 rounds of groceries pickup. So while our CARD basically translate to time, and while time is a great measurement to consider, community currency offers many other opportunities to distribute value and reflect what the community values the most. So an example that we can think of, and you can see here, is that the elder may not have many items that he or she could offer, but may have more essential needs. The community may recognize the elders may require more assistance and decide to double the amount of CARDs given to someone that assists an elder fulfill their needs. So one example is that you could allow vulnerable populations, such as elders, to start negative in the system as a way to really tackle the most vulnerable. And perhaps this community also went through the pandemic or another disaster and wants to collectively assist local businesses. And many may focus on helping the local business owner, in this case of this example here, throw a block party to assist with urgent revenue that he or she needs to pay for a loan. So this is just a little illustration about how this could play out. In the next slide, still talking about menu and values of work. What if the community wants to, for example, have access to cheaper fresh food and realize that they have the space and would like to build a community garden? They could give more CARDs to tasks that are related to that primary goal. So a great example from the Asian initiatives is that they established a rule to help encourage community scale tasks as opposed to solely enabling individual tasks. So they do that by including in the program something called what they call SOCs, an equation that gives 1 point for community SOCs for every 5 points that you acquire iSOCs. So in this example of a scenario, each transaction between these 4 personas would add CARDs that can only be used for a community scale improvement, such as the garden. Ultimately, community currency shall not be static, and this is a really important point. The community should continuously revisit the menus and values and adapt them to their needs at the time, with always short, medium, and long-term goals. In thinking about disaster recovery, and we have here in this illustration, the system could offer that flexibility immediately after shock strikes, considering everyone is vulnerable, by offering great opportunities to spend the CARDs or maybe a credit. Local governments could chime in and back up the effort, another way to provide disaster assistance that would be reliant on the local economy as opposed to depending upon federal and state dollars. Also, institutions, service providers, areas maybe within the same region that were not as heavily affected could be offering that credit following an event. So now I'll turn to Lydia to speak, or Digser and Rhonda to speak a little bit on our conclusion.
Creating a community currency, we understand, is a more complex process than what we presented here. However, we are convinced that community currency can act as a community strategy to really bolster and strengthen neighborhood economies. It deserves considerable use in New York City, and the time is now. Let's address economic hardship and build momentum during this pandemic. In response to the pandemic, we need to uplift mutual aid groups. They provide a starting point as well as other active community members. Let's incentivize this work and meet people where they are. There are already many people doing this. And so the next step could be mapping out the existing local parallel systems that exist. So for example, food stamps or points attributed by local business owners. and offer that these stakeholders become participants in a community currency system. The city stakeholders could really pursue pilot projects in NYCHA public housing campuses. There are residents that are already doing this. Like we spoke about earlier at Polo Grounds with Asia Initiatives. How do we scale this work and design it so that it can work across the NYCHA campuses and leverage really the network of over 400 residents and local members. This tool can help advance local goals, create more resiliency, sustainability in communities. It provides equity, affordability, can address health and economic opportunity and upward mobility.
Thanks, Digzer. So ultimately, the question for planners is, why should we care about this? Why should planners and designers care about community currency? And we often focus on tools that assist with physical improvements, but often forget about invisible tools. And these are the ways to design new systems that help advance planning tools. We're all looking for ways to work ground up, engage with communities to co-design our future. And this is a tool that helps bring strength to local decisions. It builds self-determination and it brings self-sufficiency to those who are most vulnerable. So what we want to leave you with, the questions we want to leave you with is, how do you see this tool fitting in your work? And how do you see this tool fitting in your life? So we have gotten a bunch of questions in the chat. And we have about 9 minutes or so where we can sort of tackle them. So thank you guys. And we're now open to any other questions you have in addition to the ones that you've already submitted.
Just to address the, oh, sorry, Doreen, just to address the last question, right?
Go ahead, Manuela.
Oh. I was just going to mention that because there's a question about further readings. So I saw some notes on kind of case studies and other efforts that are happening out there that are related to this theme. One of the things that our team is really wanting to tackle is, if you go to our website, we have a survey that you can fill up with more information about either interest or kind of what you're putting here as areas that we could, focus on and help, bring those through in our website and kind of scale the information. So if anyone can, go through a website and do that, it will be really helpful so we can build more resources about this.
I was going to say that I was trying to read the comments as I was doing this and I was distracted, so I had to stop. These comments about contact Young Money, you guys are wrong. Elijah, behave yourself, please. Thank you.
So why don't we open it up for
there's some other questions. Amber.
Panel?
Yeah.
So we can kind of go one by one. We've got a lot of them, so we can kind of pick and choose. And maybe the first one, I'm kind of interested in talking about Susu, and like, how is that different? So from my perspective, or from my experience in terms of how I have sort of seen people use Susu, it's a little bit more like a revolving loan or a revolving savings fund, where people are sort of paying into something on a weekly or monthly basis, and then they can kind of tap into that as a community resource. And I don't think this is actually too different. If you think about, the system that we just built together, that's a time bank. So if you think about, in the world of Susu, that collective thing that you're drawing on is our collective set of time, our collective set of resources. And so we're not only just drawing from the financial sort of things that we pulled together, but the idea here is to say, this is what we've all got, this is what we all can offer, and this is how we might facilitate exchange. So that's maybe like one part of a community currency system, is what is the collection of resources. And what this concept does is to expand that to actually include other types of wants and needs in a way that I could not only see how much money is available, but what other people can offer me and add in other things that I can offer to them. Anybody else?
And just to add a point to that, I think, as you said, Lydia, SUSU's partners, which we call it in the Caribbean, these are savings, and the entire purpose of a community currency is not to be saved, it's to be spent and to circulate internally. But I think the benefit of both SUSU's partners and community currency is that it also includes the informal economy. And that's a segment of the population that you want to participate in this. So street vendors, people who are selling ice cream at the park, whatever it is, these are people who can also participate. And there is no, unless a community decides that we want to alienate a certain set of people, it is by nature very inclusive in the amount of people and the communities that can participate in it.
Just to answer a little bit on the one that just came in about capitalism, so community currency can operate in parallel to our existing financial system. And that's what we see with a lot of local currencies, that it's not necessarily an either or. This can definitely complement. So, imagine that everybody is, we still got dollars. We still are doing our work. We're still getting paid in our, dollars and cents. But there are things that I'm doing. Let's say I'm babysitting my neighbor's kids. Let's say, I need someone to lend me their car. These are things that typically are just trades and exchanges. But if we want to add value to, like, let's say unpaid labor, work that's happening that's really important for the community, that's not being paid, that doesn't really have a financial value in today's economy, this kind of system can add an additional way for people who have their needs falling between the cracks to earn credits, to use debt, to build relationships and community connections, and make sure that they're able to fill their basic needs even when the dollar is not sort of meeting the need. So I guess to me, it's something that is an interesting thing to think about in and of itself, but it can be used in combination with our current systems.
And the entire purpose is it's localizing. So Ithaca is a small town of, I don't know, less than 100,000 people. This can be considered like a block. It can be Flatbush Avenue money, whatever it is. But the idea is to localize money. Of course, there are lots of things like going to the dentist, going to the doctor. There may not be someone to provide that service within that geographic area. So then you use your regular, US currency. Alternatively, whatever you can spend locally, you would use this local alternative currency.
There was a question that we got that is somewhat related to this, and it was, are there examples of this work in more transient communities where people are coming and going? Example, college campuses, or does it kind of depend on a stable community with less changes? And I would say, interestingly, one of our first inspirations for looking at community currency was the college population, because it's noted that college kids sometimes have, cards that is loaded gets loaded with a certain amount of money, as in the case of NYU, and they get to use it at a number of participating merchants around their campus. And this is something that happens across the United States as an example of an alternative form of currencies that college students do get their own kind of currency. So that's one example of a somewhat more transient or less stable population of people who are moving in and out, is that they have a central administrative body that can manage it for them.
Maybe one thing we can talk about is, I see two questions about, can we start off with an initial membership through a CSA, or, how can we get the community to buy into something like this? We've talked a lot about, the overall sort of structure of it, but because these are sort of grounded in community, you can define community in whatever way you want. So if your community is a CSA, if your community is a mutual aid organization, if your community is your block, you can say that this is our community. If it has a starting point with an existing membership base with people who have a good understanding of the community needs on both sides, or what people want and what they're not able to fulfill, then you're that much further ahead in the process. That doesn't mean that you can't start from scratch and define your community from nothing. But that might give you a little bit of a head start. And in terms of how you get people bought into it, I think this is traditional, planning and kind of organizing. It's about, making a pitch to say this stuff is valuable, that we, need to make sure is happening in our community. We together have these needs that are not being filled, and what can we do to support each other? And this system could be a tool for us to do that. So there are lots of ways for us to think about bringing this idea and a concept to community and the ways to do that. But it's just about exploring this as a concept together.
There was also a question about how this helps building wealth, which I think it's key for us to tackle. I think that ultimately it comes to, sometimes, wealth is not just measured by how much money you have, but really, your quality of life. So especially with the theme of this conference, one person may, have an hour or two to, let's say, walk a dog. I would love to have a dog. I cannot have one right now, but I would love, to be able to do that for a neighbor that I yet don't know, because I just moved to a new neighborhood anyways. So if I could do that and then use that time that I donated to get something that I need that I currently cannot pay for. So let's say a massage, that this builds wealth because it builds the opportunity for everyone to have access in a more affordable manner to their needs and wants, depending on how much they can give, which is not necessarily money.
Okay, so I'm the killjoy, I'm the DIFCOM timekeeper, and then we are already over at 1:30. So I think we can do you mind if I close out? I know we have a lot of great questions, but I do have to sort of close out this panel. And I think you see on our website, go to Together Resilience, and all our contact info is there. There's we have a Gmail address which you can contact us. We'd love to continue this conversation more, and we definitely would love to share more resources. Just connect with us, and we'd love to form a bigger coalition to talk about what does community currency and community resilience mean. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Betty.